All right, guys, welcome back here. Obviously, you see I'm back in the saddle here, NC Preps, after being away for a little bit. But I wanted to kick off the show with a really big interview. I've got the King joining us, and by the King, I don't mean Richard Petty or Elvis Presley. I got the real King joining us, Sammy Batten, a long time Fayetteville Observer writer. And Sammy, I know you got some construction going on in there, and that's cool. I'm just happy to have you. But hey, welcome to the program tonight. Appreciate your time.
Oh man, it's always my honor to be in your presence, Chris. You know that.
Well, before I get started, I want to find out how you got the name the King. I've always known you. Russell Stone always calls you Sammy the King. I just wanted to kind of try to find out where that came from.
Well, that's a college nickname, and I'm not sure I can go into the details of it. So, but I was a member of the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity at UNC, and during those days, I had my moments, and that's where that nickname came from.
Wow. Well, hey, that's cool. Sounds like you got some renovations going on there in the house, so that's going to be really cool. I'm glad they're working in this cold weather and not me. But 31 years, I believe it was, at the Fayetteville Observer. You used at the Robinsonia before that. I've seen you covering countless high school games. I really think of you as one of the top recruiting writers. I know that, they've got recruiting services and Rivals and Scout and all those guys, but I feel like you far exceeded what I've ever seen from them. Just kind of tell everybody, maybe from the recruiting standpoint, what enthused you so much about it, and what made you so in tune to the recruiting scene?
Well, Chris, I'm old enough that I go back to when there was nothing but recruiting magazines. I got started. Eddie Landreth, rest his soul, was doing the state rankings for Super Prep, which was a magazine covering recruiting across the country at the time, and he got so much other freelance work that he couldn't handle that, so he handed that off to me, and I was able to work with Alan Wallace, who was, again, one of the godfathers, I think, of college football recruiting across the country. He developed Super Prep into a really prominent magazine, and again, that came out twice a year, so that's the only recruiting news you kind of got back then, and so I kind of got into it then, and it just went on from there. As we went into the internet era, I wrote for our paper, but also several other websites, and have just enjoyed, watching kids develop from their high school into college, and many of them onto the NFL.
Oh, well, like I said, you've seen hundreds and hundreds of high school football games and other high school sports. Is there any one or two high school events or moments or games that you've covered that really stand out over the past third of a century or so that you've been writing about high school sports?
I'll tell you the one that I always tell people about, and again, I'm bad at remembering actual years, but I was covering South Robinson High School in the State 1A playoffs one year, and Vontae Leach, who wound up being a Super Bowl champion fullback with the Baltimore Ravens, Vontae was on that team, and I saw Vontae Leach run the ball 25 consecutive times on offense and still turn around and play defense in that game, which South Robinson won. But I actually asked Mike Brill, his coach, after the game. I said, Mike, were you trying to kill Vontae? Because, you just didn't give him a break. And that was one of the most incredible individual performances in games. And South Robinson went on to win that game. Vontae went on to East Carolina, had a great career there, and again, was a three-time All-Pro in the NFL. But I've never seen an individual run the ball or be on the field for that many plays in a high school athletic event.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And let me get you out of that solo shot there. You're right. And I think that you and even myself can both consider ourselves fortunate. I've spent a great deal of my adult life in Fayetteville and was fortunate enough to coach there and seen a lot of high school ball. But just in that general area, the Cape Fear region, you talk about some of the best coaches who have ever come through. Obviously, Tony, Bob Paroli, Randy Ledford, some of those guys come to mind. Bobby Poss. I mean, you've seen some of the best in coaching, but also in just some of the top athletes that have come through. And I think people forget, especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, how strong that Fayetteville region has been for football.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at those days, the Doug Wilkersons, the Marvin Powells, people like that, back then, you wonder how a USC found out about a Marvin Powell and drew him all the way from Fayetteville, North Carolina, to the West Coast. That's not as, unheard of now because of the internet and because everybody knows where all the great players are now. Back then, in the 70s, that wasn't the case. And yeah, I mean, the Brad Edwards, Donnell Wolfords, I mean, the list is endless of great players from the Fayetteville area. And if you expand that, out into the Cape Fear region, which we have covered through the years, you got Chester McLaughlin, the Tim Worleys. I mean, Tim Worley was one of the most incredible athletes I've ever seen. The first big, fast athlete that I think, Tim was about 6'2", 210 pounds, and was a world-class junior Olympic sprinter when he was in high school. And until I saw Julius Peppers, he was the most incredible athlete I've ever seen. But then Julius came along and had all those same attributes and was 6'6" and playing halfback, in high school. So this region has put out some incredible athletes, and I've been very fortunate to watch a lot of them.
Before I ask you kind of what your next phase of your career is going to be, because I have no question that you're not finished. Heck, if I had the money, I'd hire you today. But what are some of the most fun? I was reading in your column when you were leaving the Observer. Some of the coaches out there, Bobby Bowden called you Bud, and Roy Williams calls you Sammy Boy. And I know that you've had some great relationships with other coaches. What are some of those coaches, whether high school or college, that you just always enjoyed interacting with? Kind of your go-to guy if you needed a good quote on something. Who were some of those the best characters that kind of go down in your memories as just guys that you feel fortunate enough to have been able to cover?
Well, actually, I feel fortunate to have covered all of them. But if you're talking about quotes, Ruffin McNeil and Steve Logan at East Carolina were always worth a good quote. David Cutcliffe, I could sit and listen to David Cutcliffe for hours, just talk about football. I mean, the guy is just so knowledgeable and makes it interesting, when you talk to him. Here in our region, like you said, Bob Paroli has always been somebody that if you had a question, he would give you a good answer. Richard Beatty has always been one of my favorites, coach for a long time here, Jack Britt, and then now at Scotland County. And then, as you know, Russell Stone and I are fraternity brothers. And Russell, when he was here, whether it was at Purnell Sweat or South Robinson or Lumberton or over at Douglas Byrd, where you guys had tremendous success, Russell always was good for a good quote, no matter what the subject was, whether it was football or anything else. But those the coaches that I've dealt with have always been great. Bobby Bowden was great. Roy. When I first got out of college, I worked for a tabloid called Carolina Blue, and it covered UNC athletics. I was around the basketball office at UNC a lot when Roy was just basically a graduate assistant there, and his job. He had a little desk in the main office as you walked in the basketball office at Carmichael Auditorium, and his job was to get all the paper clippings out of the newspapers every day that was written about UNC, so he could give those to Coach Smith. So Roy and I go back a long way, and that's where that Sammy Boy nickname comes from.
Wow. Shifting gears one more time, just to Fayetteville in general, and I want to just kind of talk about how fortunate I feel like Fayetteville's been to have you writing about sports, but also just how fortunate I think Fayetteville for so long has been to have such great sports minds and writers and people. I feel fortunate to have had a long-time show with Brett Freelander on the radio here in town. And thinking about some of the guys, Sonny Jones, Thomas Pope and obviously the great Earl Vaughn and some of these guys. I just think that Fayetteville citizens probably took for granted how strong the writing pool was in that town. I mean, for the longest time, and there's still a great paper today. But I just think it's almost unheard of to have had a sports staff that quite as good as what you guys have been a part of for so long.
Yeah, it's been incredible, and I've often sat in the newsroom or the sports department and looked around and said to myself, well, dag, I'm like the fourth or fifth best writer in this room. And that's very true. I mean, we've had guys like, Chip Scoggins, who now is a columnist for the Minneapolis Tribune, Dan Weider, who works in Chicago covering the Chicago Bears, Tyler Dunn, the people you just mentioned, Earl Vaughn and Thomas Pope and Kim Hasty are all legends in this area. Sonny Jones is one of the most underrated people who has contributed to sports, not only at the Fayetteville Observer, but has worked in Rockingham and in Bladen County covering sports in this area. I've been really fortunate. Mike Graff is one of the greatest writers, I've ever been around who worked here with us. So we've been really extremely fortunate, and I have to work with so many great people who really made this paper, a great paper, for the local readership for many, many years.
Yeah, I mean, spent time in Fayetteville in the military, coached there. I mean, always, even to this day, keep up with the paper just because I want to find out what's going on in the region, but two, that's just so great for so long. Well, kind of to cap this interview out, again, I appreciate your time, but just tell us what do you think's next for you? I mean, do you plan on continuing to write, or are you going to just kind of move on into retirement and start fishing? What's next for you?
A little both. I want to do some traveling. My goal has always been, once I retired, to go and live in Europe for 4 or 5 months. And of course, the COVID pandemic has kind of put that on hold for now. But I do want to keep writing, particularly about football recruiting. I think that's an area that I've kind of established a niche, and I have several internet sites that I do some work for, and hope to continue that, and maybe even expand that some. If anybody's interested, I am available. I have plenty of time now, so I'd be glad to do some of that or any other kind of work. Like I said, I don't want to work full time. I'm very fortunate that I don't have to, but I do want to keep my hand, and I have been offered already some positions. In fact, the funniest offer I got, which I know was not serious, but Bill Sachovka, the head coach over at Pine Forest, when I told him I was retiring, Bill said he needed some coaches on his staff, and said he could use me. And I'm sure he was joking, because I'm sure he's not that desperate for coaches.
Well, I've seen your athletic ability on the softball field. I'm pretty sure you could get out there and coach some football if you really needed it.
Well, that is part of the other plan. I'm going to be a semi-pro softball player as well.
Well, I know you'll be a good one. Well, Sammy, I appreciate your time. I mean, I appreciate the friendship and just you reaching out to me for stuff, and me being able to reach out to you for help over the years. And you've been an amazing asset, not only to our state, but just to the recruits and the readers and everybody who's been touched by your work. And I'm just glad you got on here with me today to kind of recap that. And hopefully maybe I can find a way to count my piggy bank and hire you for a few articles moving forward. But I really appreciate you, Sammy.
Hey, well, thank you, Chris. I mean, you've always been a great friend, and what you do for the high school football, not only in North Carolina, but South Carolina too, over the years. I hope everybody really appreciates that, because you've done a great job with it.
Well, you're the king, Sammy Batten. We appreciate you, and we'll try to catch up with you next time.